Hi there, how was your day? Imagine, if you will, a game that molds itself around you, your personality, and most importantly, your choices. A game where what you choose affects the outcome of the story. A game that gives each player their own truly unique experience. Have you got a good picture of that game? Nice, isn't it? Now I want you to imagine leaving that game out for so long that it goes lukewarm and kind of stinky. Because today we are talking about Telltale's The Walking Dead, a rollercoaster of a franchise. This is a game series that had the best possible start before getting kind of weird after the first game, but we're not talking about the weird sequels today. Nope, we're talking about the good one. The game that started this downward spiral and one of my personal favourites, Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1. When this game first came out, it was met with critical acclaim. It was praised for its interesting and new gameplay, deep story, and vibrant characters. People immediately fell in love with this title, and even after its dozens of subpar sequels squirted their way onto the scene, everyone still fondly look back at this game. But how about now, 10 years after the game has come out? Does it still hold up? Well, join me today as we get into the spooky season mood and see if The Walking Dead Season 1 holds up. Okay, so now is normally the time I go into my thoughts on the story and give a summary, but I kinda can't do that here. As you probably know, this game is a choose your own adventure kind of deal, meaning the choices you make will have an effect. If you annoy someone, they'll leave you for dead later, and if someone annoys you, well... Long story short, my experience with the game's story is not the same as someone else's experience with the game's story. At least at first glance. While the game definitely gives off a strong illusion of choice, it is ultimately just that, an illusion. Sure, you could save that person's life, but if they have the opportunity to die but then don't, they will have absolutely nothing left to do, and they will die later anyway. For example, in my playthrough, I chose to save this kid Ben only for him to do nothing for the rest of the game before he died just one episode later. And this happens a lot throughout not just this game, but the greater series as a whole. And while this is a tad disappointing, it doesn't take the importance out of saving or not saving someone, as while that person might die anyway, the people who live on will care very much about your choice. This is where the player's choice really comes into play, as any choice you will make, whether it's saying the wrong thing at the wrong time or letting someone die, will affect the way that people around you feel about you, and they are very vocal when they disagree with your choice. This is where your choices matter. At the end of the day, your choices don't affect the story. The same broad strokes will always play out no matter what you do, but what your choices do affect are the people who you are with through those broad strokes. And the person you'll be thinking about affecting the most by far is Clementine. Clementine is a positively adorable little girl who you run into at the very beginning of the game. I could write a whole video on how well written Clem is here, but I'll try to keep it brief. Clem is one of the most convincingly written child characters in all of media. She's grown up enough to not be a constant annoying burden, but she's still a kid who can get easily overwhelmed, make crappy decisions, and need looking after. And she looks up to you a heck of a lot and will pretty much take whatever you say and do as gospel. If you teach her to do something, she will do it, and I absolutely love how this game makes you second guess what you say and do as a result. And trust me, you will not want to upset her, because this game makes her the cutest thing. And outside of Clem, there are a range of characters who you'll have to worry about keeping happy. You have Larry, a grumpy old man who knows your deepest secret and will spill it if you so much as look at him the wrong way. Lily, an easily ticked off woman who could snap at any moment, and then you have Kenny.
Hey, Lee, you know how to pick a lock, right?
No, why would you say that?
Well, you're, urban?
The story here is split across 5 episodes that all have their own self-contained plot that feed into the big overarching story. Think MCU with zombies. Sorry if the audio sounds a bit different, I had to move downstairs to my dining room mid-recording. Sorry. Overall, these episodes are fine, none of them are necessarily bad, but some are definitely better than others. In my opinion, episode 2 is the best. I just love the contained storyline here, it's great. The basic gist is after our group has survived for a while, we're pretty much starved, but oh, would you look at that, a bunch of farmers have conveniently shown up offering food and shelter. Isn't that convenient? It sure would be a shame if this was too good to be true. Uh-oh, they're cannibals. Well, you can't win them all, I guess. Obviously this is oversimplifying it, but I really do enjoy the plot of this episode, as it really stands out as a neat self-contained plot that really feels like a classic B-movie. And looking beyond the singular narratives, the overarching story here is so easy to get lost in. The writers did a great job at pulling you into this world, making each beat feel earned and each death feel heartbreaking. And speaking of heartbreak, yeah, that ending, it happened. Seriously though, this ending is heavier than it ever needed to be, god damn. The game makes you choose to have Clem either shoot you or leave you to turn into a walker, and after that it has the audacity to have you choose your final words to her, which like, hey, stop it, this game is depressing enough. And while we're on the topic of sadness, can we talk about how sad this story gets? Obviously, with it being a game set in the end of the world, some sadness is expected, but this game really takes it to another level. Your group is basically being toyed with by the end. Every time hopes are up, another blow is dealt. Every time something good happens, something bad follows seconds after, and the game rubs this in your face even further by having you at the runt of it. Someone bit, chances are you're gonna have to take them out. The group is hungry, you're gonna have to distribute the rations. For my scoring here, I'm gonna go for a 9 out of 10. The story here is great, and playing over these episodes to get different outcomes is always enticing, but the impact of our choices feels like something that could have been further expanded upon. Especially when it comes to character deaths, I cannot tell you how disappointing it is to save a character just for them to die like 2 minutes later. But Walking Dead is the kind of game where if the world and atmosphere are even slightly off, the whole game could fall apart. So I'm glad to report that the world presented here is downright fantastic. The whole world ending thing is really hit home in just how empty everything is. All the streets are desolate and quiet, and when you run into something, it's either wreckage, unuseful, or something new to worry about. Weirdly enough, the thing making this game's world feel so alive is the lack of life, and that was by no means an accident. After all, this is literally a game about the Walking Dead, and this world is just about as dead as the walkers. Although just because it looks empty doesn't mean it is. If you take the time to look and explore when given the chance, you can find some neat stuff, and Lee almost always has something to say about it.
Fill one of those teacups with some bourbon if I could.
This is a clear-cut 9 out of 10. The world the game gives to us is convincingly immersive. The gameplay of The Walking Dead is just about as mixed a mixed bag can get. Let's start out on the positives. When it comes to choice making, that's when this game is clearly at its best. Interacting with the characters and really giving time to think about what choices are the best for you will never not be intriguing. Something that I'm particularly fond of is when the game limits that time to make the choices with. More often than not, you'll have more than enough time to give it thought, but there are times when the game pulls the rug from under you and gives you much less time to think than typical. Hell, most of the times when this is done, it's done to make choices that are already harder. The game also adds extra pressure onto you by telling you what someone thought of your decision in blunt, no BS text. Meaning you know when you've messed up. This can create for some interesting scenarios where you're juggling your interests and the greater interests of the group. And these choices aren't always do or die. In fact, most of the time these choices are choosing what you're going to say in a conversation or choosing a side in a seemingly petty argument. Although trust me, those petty arguments will pile up, and if a character feels you haven't sided with them enough, they will let you know later. In addition to this, the game sports some surprisingly decent action sequences. Never anything too crazy, this game clearly puts its focus on the choice making, but it's always a welcome change of pace that almost always leads to more difficult choices anyway. However, outside of this, there's basically nothing. Yeah, when I can only point out 2 noteworthy game features, you know that's probably not a good thing. I mean, the gameplay here really is pretty barren outside of the choice making, which I would be totally fine with if it wasn't for the 20-minute long blocks of nothingness in between. And when I say 20 minutes of nothingness, I mean it, because in between all the actually interesting choice-based sequences, there's just full 20 minutes where the game becomes a point-and-click adventure game. These big blocks of times are just senseless puzzles that are not at all interesting. These puzzles are simple as hell, but the game cooks up enough crap to make sure they last a heck of a lot longer. You go over here and find this thing you need, but oh no, it's just out of reach, so then you go over here and find what you need to get it, and ta-da, you did it! But now there's another obstacle in your way, better clear that out. Finally got it? Nice! Now let's haul it back to where we initially needed it and do that like 2 more times to complete this quote-unquote puzzle. I honestly can't think of any good reason for these to be here beyond padding each episode's runtime, making them like 2 hours long. But the episodes are already long enough. Without these chunks, the episodes would be closer to 50 to 60 minutes. And sure, the gameplay was somewhat one note before, but at least that note was interesting. But now the episodes are like 2 hours long each, and I might be bad at puzzles or something, but these sections are just a complete drag. This also makes going back to revisit episodes to get more endings and whatnot a complete slog. It might be a me thing, but I'd thoroughly prefer if these just weren't here. And that's the gameplay. Like I said, the actual gameplay here is pretty barren, which would be bearable if it consisted only of the interesting stuff, but for some reason Telltale just really felt like shoving these puzzles down our throat. And when these segments take up about half of the episode, that's a pretty big flaw to just ignore. Not to mention how barren the gameplay already was. 6 out of 10. The visuals of this game are yet another mixed bag, and yet again I'll start off with the positives. The comic booky art style here is pretty neat. The thick outlines and hand-drawn feel not only serve as a nice homage to the series' origin, but also look good and ensure the game won't age as horribly as it would had they had gone for a more realistic style. But that doesn't mean the game is immune to aging. Some of these animations are jank as hell and at times just really awkward. Alongside this, there are some just ugly textures and obvious 2D images being thrown into the background at times. It's not the most outrageous flaw ever, it's mostly just thanks to the game being 10 years old now. This was a lot less of a problem with the more recent installments, but an issue's an issue. 7 out of 10. The music in this game reminds me a lot of the music in Breath of the Wild, because it's used pretty sparingly, if at all. And also just like in Breath of the Wild, this helps hammer home just how empty and dead the world is, while also making the moments music is used stick out that much more. And when music is used, it's pretty solid. A lot of guitars and pianos, it's all decent. 8 out of 10. Telltale's The Walking Dead is an indisputable classic, and despite some of its flaws being very heavily exposed, it's still one hell of a time. Does it hold up today? While its visual presentation may be lacking and some of the gameplay might drag on, I'd absolutely recommend revisiting it, or if you're one of the few who still haven't given it a go, I'd recommend doing so right now. The main meat of the gameplay is enough to keep me engaged for hours, and that story, man. It is easily the main attraction here, and if you're coming for it, well, there are a few other games I'd recommend. This is a story that isn't afraid to get brutal, will kill off some of your favourite characters, and will force it all upon you. Who sticks behind you and who you'll befriend is up to you. Who you save is up to you. And just what kind of example you're setting for Clementine is up to you. Your experience is tailored by how you play. Without further ado, let's find out the final score. 7.8 out of 10. Trust me, I did the maths. Well, I've been Robbie with an IE, you've been amazing, have a lovely day.
Homo parade!